Welcome everyone to Positive Luxury's Future of Premium Drinks webinar. Thank you all very much for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. And an especially warm welcome to you if it's the first time joining a Positive Luxury webinar. Since 2011, Positive Luxury has been helping organisations adapt to the new climate economy. Our ESG Plus assessment is the only sustainability assessment tailored specifically for the luxury industry and has a unique focus on innovation. Organisations that we certify receive the Butterfly Mark, the globally respected trademark that is the independent evidence of their positive impact on nature and society. This webinar forms part of our knowledge programme for the luxury industry and highlights key issues, offering clear actions organisations can take to accelerate sustainability. It also complements our latest Future of Premium Drinks report, which is published today. And I do encourage you all to download the new report at positiveluxury.com. Premium drinks is without doubt one of the most fragile of the luxury categories, as it is so highly dependent on climate, soil and water. But as well as these environmental issues, it's also vital to consider the social and financial pillars of sustainability and also explore the role innovation has to play. So to explore these topics, I'm delighted to introduce our webinar host, Positive Luxury co-founder and CEO, Diana Verde Nieto. And we're also honoured to have a brilliant panel from across the globe, offering world-leading expertise across science, sustainability, wine, spirits, marketing, and consumer trends. So a welcome and a huge thank you to Polly Hammond, founder and CEO of Five Forests, the award-winning digital marketing agency, working with wineries and experts on how to engage consumers with brands and products. Jessica Julmy, now using all her experience from working at the House of Krug Champagne as managing director of Château, Galoupet, a winery reviving rare ecosystems to craft exceptional Côte de Provence wines and constructing a sustainable wine estate from soil to bottle. Dr. Gregory V Jones, a world-renowned atmospheric scientist and wine climatologist whose work on climate and vine growth has informed and influenced the wine industry across the globe, and he regularly features in the top industry leaders in the industry. And hopefully joining us, technical issues allowing, will be Dr. Matthew Patel, founder of Aspen Distillers, a premium spirit company headquartered in Colorado, built with sustainability at the core of the business and a leader in embedding innovation into all aspects of productions. So the initial webinar will be approximately 30 minutes, followed by 10 minutes or so of Q&A. Please do post your questions in the Q&A tab in the webinar browser, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you all over to Diana.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you, Jessica, Polly, and Gregory, and for your time to be here. Like Jamie said, premium drinks is very much linked to climate, and it's actually probably one of the most fragile industries that we actually have in our portfolio. So I would like to start with you, Gregory, because you hold all the facts from a very kind of high-level perspective, which is, can you tell us in a nutshell why the wine and the spirits industry and climate change are so much intertwined, and one needs to be much aware of the other? In fact, one needs to be much aware of the other.
Well, all forms of agribusiness are clearly influenced by climate. So I think, when we look at the premium drinks industry, whether it's everything from wine to spirits, we're talking about products that are made typically from specialty crops or in a special framework. And those type of production systems are fairly fragile to climate in general. Climate has clearly changed. There's absolutely no doubt in terms of that. We know we're transitioning into a much more rapid change in climate as well due to human influences. And so as a large sector of the economy, premium drinks, everything from wine through spirits and so on, are very necessary to look at it from a resiliency and vulnerability kind of framework.
Thank you very much. And before going on to Jessica, I would like to ask you, obviously, we have regions on the world that has been very famous for wines and spirits as well. That actually, this kind of regions like Spain, Portugal, France, even Argentina, when I'm actually from, is moving, is kind of moving to other geographies. So where are we looking at this expansion? Where other markets are we looking to actually start expanding because of climate change?
Well, I mean, the changes in climate have been with us for millennia. And if you look back in history, I mean, individuals in small communities and other continents always moved when the climate changed. And so moving production systems based upon what the climate will do is pretty common throughout our history. However, where we are today, our production systems are somewhat considered to be static, meaning they were expecting certain wines and certain spirits to be able to be produced from the same places all the time. We shouldn't really expect that, but we should be able to embrace the other side of the system as well, and understand that change means new products, new regions, new energies, and new things that come to our marketplace.
Thank you very much, Gregory. I mean, Jessica, you have worked with Krug, which is one of the houses that have the butterfly mark certification. And I mean, Krug is, and I don't want to have their attention to them, but Krug is a very special house because obviously nature is the one that dictates that obviously the champagne is ready for the cycle. So when you are now kind of leading a completely different house, what are the challenges that you have, and how much of the soil and nature plays a role into actually, you know, kind of ensuring that the quality of the drinks are you know, as good as other houses?
I think it's quite interesting. Thank you for that, because arriving in Côte de Provence, the reflection was completely different, because when you're in Champagne, there's a lot of rain, it's quite cold. When you're in Provence, it's warm, it's sunny, it's dry. So already looking at organic viticulture is more of an obvious choice, if you will. You don't have the same downsides that you might have in Champagne, for example. But at the same time, it allows you to look at organic viticulture quite easily. And then definitely looking into agroecology. And that's what has allowed us to easily start our conversion to organic viticulture, but also working with cover crop, without going into much detail, but also agroforestry. And in our particular case at Château Galoupet, linking our 69 hectares of vineyard with the protected woodlands, which are directly behind us. So working with the biodiversity there.
I mean, the work that you are doing is absolutely outstanding. And actually, you don't want to unpack much, but I was hoping that you did, in terms of, like, you know, tell us a little bit more top line in terms of what are the key actions that you take in order to ensure that, you know, kind of the wine is not just fantastic in terms of a taste and the quality, but also is great for nature. So, I mean, I know that it's a lot to unpack, but just in terms of the highlights, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Exactly. I think it's with everything that we've done, we wanted to make sure that we keep the quality of the wine at the center of the exercise. So in terms of the organic viticulture, it's one step, especially as I was mentioning, being in Provence, we don't have the same concerns we might have in other regions. Otherwise, working with cover crop experts have really determined what is the perfect mix of cover crop. Is it more or less mustard? Is it more or less buckwheat? More or less rye, for example? And then is it every row? Is it every other row? So it is a science, and that will go over a few years. And it's also working with an agroforestry expert, which are the fruit trees or the other kind of sorghum trees or shrubs that we can plant within the vineyard, that creates this natural highway, natural corridor, literally and figuratively, if you will, between the vineyard and this forest that is right behind us. And then making sure that we're allowing for biodiversity to regenerate within the forest, so that, okay, we might not be using pesticides, obviously part of organic viticulture, but the advantage is that by regenerating the flora and the fauna in the protected woodland, all of a sudden we're generating, for example, more bats who become our natural pest eaters, and then also working hand in hand with another association to develop the presence of bees, and that's a topic in and of itself, but really the presence of bees is such a booster for biodiversity and a few other positive effects on the vineyard itself.
Thank you very much. I was hoping that you talked about that insect corridor, because it's so powerful. And if you can just imagine the richness, not just the soil and the richness of the vines, but actually how the entire region will obviously benefit from all the actions that you're taking. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'd like to go to you, Polly, because you work with many different organizations, and the soil is something that you are also focused. So I'd like you to share a little bit. What are you seeing, not just from a wine perspective, but also from a spirits perspective?
Well, we work much more obviously on the messaging side of things and communication and sitting between all of that hard work that's being done and how we relay that to the consumer. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing, and this is kind of a positive challenge, is something, if we coin a phrase for it, that's called green hushing. I think the wine industry specifically has been participating in positive solutions for so long, but it's just been a natural part of our lives as an agricultural industry. And now it's about expressing that to our audiences in a way that, yes, it respects soil, but it explains why. It puts it in the context of what it means for that wine or that spirit that lands on their table, and how they can then become advocates for us and for the good work that we're doing, because there are a lot of solutions that are going to take consumer buy-in. I know some of them will come up in the course of this discussion, but we need them to care just as much as we do about the fragility of our product, why terroir is so important. And, we have to ourselves, we have to adapt, we have to make changes. What that means in the context of what we can offer, something as simple as price points or wine tourism, really just onboarding the consumers to something that is profound for us.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if Dr. Patel, can you hear us? Unfortunately, probably not. So let's talk a little bit about the social aspect of kind of ESG and the winemaking. So I'd like to start with you, Gregory. I mean, in your view and in your experience, what can we do better in order to protect and foster the wellness? And when I'm talking about wellness, I'm talking about overalls in a 360 perspective of everybody that works within the vineyard, not just basically in head office, but also with the soil, with the crops. So what are the steps that we can take?
Well, I think Jessica said it pretty well, that we need to really be better stewards of our operations, whether it's within the vineyard, within the surrounding landscapes. We need to manage those ecosystems to their highest functioning capability. And doing that is complicated when you're trying to produce a really good end product, but it's possible. And it takes a lot of effort in terms of how we focus not only on the landscape and the ecosystem, but the human ecosystem too, supporting our individuals that are both part of our companies, but also part of our consumer base. As Polly mentioned, having the right messaging is really important, but having a true, authentic message that really conveys what we are doing within our own environments, and having consumers come and experience that, understand that, and be a part of it, I think is really a big piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn to you, Jessica, because, LVMH is really much focused on kind of fair labor practices. So can you tell us a little bit more about how do you do it, and how, and what are the steps that you're taking in order to protect the people that are working within the vineyards?
Of course, we have a particular situation at Château Galoupet that we're quite a tight team. So there are 17 people. So already there, it's a different approach, but of course, always just as important. And we have the luxury, if not the responsibility, probably both, as part of LVMH, that it's It's no compromise on that one. I think for us, it has been critical to go beyond that, and beyond the fair labor practices. It's also embarking the teams and the region on the journey that we're going to, because as Gregory, you were saying, is that it's so important for it to be authentic, but for people to be part of it and for people to understand it. So I think of the team at Château Galoupet. How do we get them to understand the importance of what we're doing? So training with our partner from a beekeeping perspective, we're working with the French Observatory for beekeeping, and having their team come in for one day and share. Sorry, my phone is sliding. I realize share what we've learned together, and so that the team, the viticulturist, the cellar master, all the different the accountant, understand what is the importance of bees and all of that. So I think it starts also at that level. I'm afraid I haven't answered your question specifically, but I think at this point for us, it's going beyond that and embarking the team on that journey. But also, again, what you were saying, Gregory, in terms of the region, I've mentioned this protected woodland that we have and the work that we're doing with a biodiversity association, the Conservatory for Natural Spaces, and our dream is that this would become this forest would become open to the public, so that the people of Provence can discover their biodiversity, can discover those different kinds of bat species that are unique to Provence, that can discover a certain kind of chamomile and so on, and really understand it better. So I think it's by all means of fair labor practices, but also the transmission of messages of how this is all linked, and the importance of each of those players and what they can contribute to that change.
What I love about Château Galoupet is the fact that you not only have fantastic quality wine, but also you have all these, I would say, backstory in terms that you're just talking about, that you can talk about in the same breath about forestry and bees and, kind of ecotourism, and also enjoy fantastic wine in the sun. Maybe I'm just imagining this because, I'm based in London. So, but thank you very much for sharing us and to help us dream. Polly, I like to kind of turn to you, because I think how you tell a story is as important as the story itself. And when you talk about the people's story, is actually fundamental for success. So although at the elephant in the room in terms of how we ensuring that vineyard and spirit companies have fair labor practices, what are you coming across in terms of what are those human stories that probably resonate the most to you and you have seen that inspires you?
Yeah. So what I really loved about what both Gregory and Jessica have just expressed, and we see this in our panels and we see this in our messaging, hopefully from our leadership, is that we know when we're telling an authentic story, and we know that so often that is leadership driven, that we've got open-minded leadership who, whether it's on a social side or an environmental side, the story that underpins their success is actually that as leaders, they're willing to listen to what the research is saying, to see what our luxury brands are doing, to learn from our staff. I mean, I'm the oldest person on my staff, and I am such a cheerleader for millennials and Gen Z, and the brands that are listening to them and how they tell the stories, how they tell the story of the brand itself. These are the brands that are moving forward at pace. And that probably, in terms of authentic storytelling, that's what I see as most impactful, is that it is authentic because it is genuinely from the ethos of the leadership. They're learning right along with us, and they have a willingness to explore. They have a willingness to publicly fail. I mean, not everything that we do in making strides works. And if we're afraid to take that risk, if our staff is afraid to come to us and tell a story and share something that they think would work or that we need to be conveying to our audiences, then our progress is going to be stunted. So that's the thing, that when I'm sitting down with my clients, I want to know what they really believe in. No brand, to be fair, can enact every single solution that comes our way. Find the ones that you believe in and that are feasible, and give your business and give your people the ability to care for those as much as you do.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to try again. Matthew, can you hear us? I am quite disappointed that Matthew has not been able to join, because he has the other side of the story, which is the spirit side. And, you know, as important as the terroir for wine is also from spirits. But I will owe you that one, and hopefully we can do another webinar soon that we can actually bring that to the plate. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the second big elephant in the room, carbon emissions. So obviously everybody have heard about climate change, 1.5 degrees, the fact that we actually need to kind of do our best as businesses to really kind of get to 1.5 degrees to reduction pre-industrial revolution levels. And in the premium drinks sphere, the elephant in the room, or one of the elephants in the room, is glass. So I like to start with you, Jessica, in terms of, you know, kind of as a consumer. I mean, of course, I care about my drink in terms of like how it looks like, but I care much more about the quality, the friends, the whole experience, and the pairing more than the pretty bottle. So what are the steps that you're taking at Château Galoupet to address that, if any, and what are you seeing in the industry?
Thank you for that, and I think that it's such a perfect transition to what Polly was saying just now. I have to say I got a bit teary-eyed when you were talking, Polly, about taking risks and trying and being prepared to fail, because otherwise we're completely paralyzed. And in this today, packaging, for example, there is no silver bullet. There just is none, and we have to try. And to answer the question more specifically, from a winery perspective, depending on the studies you look at, carbon emissions, packaging, represents 40% of a winery's carbon footprint. So from the beginning, when we were looking at kind of our reawakening at Château Galoupet, we knew that it was one thing to have really more respectful viticulture, but if that wasn't accompanied by a change in the packaging, we were undoing with our feet what we had built with our hands. And this is when it became clear to me that it was such a game of whack-a-mole. You find something that's recycled, but it's not recyclable. You find something that's recyclable, but not recycled, or it's heavy. And so when we're looking at our wine, one of the options for our aging wine was glass. And for us, glass has two topics to be addressed, is its weight and the percentage of recycled material. So this we discovered through this life cycle assessment, because we really wanted to make our decisions built on concrete results and concrete findings. And so the first step was diminishing the weight of the bottle. So working with our glass maker, our glass partner, Veralia, in diminishing the weight of our bottle. And then the next step was discovering that whilst transparent glass, which is quite the norm in Rosé de Provence, especially as consumers are quite attached to seeing the color of their rosé before they select. Most transparent glass is new glass, basically. So it doesn't integrate any recycled material, whilst green glass or brown glass integrates naturally much more recycled glass. And that's where we decided to go with brown glass, actually. So two choices that will have allowed us to significantly diminish the carbon footprint of our Cru Classé wine.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for the innovation, but secondly, I want to thank you for the honesty and to sharing with everybody today your challenges and how you're finding the solutions. So thank you so much, Jessica. And I'd like to go to you, Gregory, because I'm sure that you know probably similar things, but from where you sit, what has been your experiences working with different vineyards and so on, and what is the innovation within the packaging arena you have seen?
Well, I think both Jessica and Polly are spot on in terms of the broader conversation. I think in general, we need to be, as a society, very aware of how we influence climate. We need to be dealing with aspects of things that we can handle relative to mitigating climate. But I think that also allows us to be better stewards and have the adaptive capacity to live within our environments in a more positive way. Of course, that happens in the vineyard, that happens in the production stream. I think we have a lot of challenges within that production stream to figure out, whether it's not putting a capsule on the bottles, saving a little bit from that impact area, or using slightly lower weight bottles. I do think that there is a place for other packaging, whether it be cans or PET or other types of material that we can use. There's also some savings that come about just simply by changing the shape of the bottle and being able to put a bottle together that instead of shipping 12 in a case, it's 14 or 15 in a case. So I think that there's some really inventive packaging that can happen, not only in the glass, but in just in the material that puts the shippers, the shipping packages together. So, we need to look at all solutions across this spectrum. And I think that all industries need to do that. And those are part of what will help us mitigate further climate change, but also allowing us to open our minds in terms of adaptive capacity components that we have within our businesses.
Thank you very much. And this is a great segue, because I know Polly is quite a disruptive lady. And, and we have discussed in the past about, what can be done regarding packaging innovation. And I love you to share some of your radical ideas with our teams and our listeners.
This is where Diana's going to get me in trouble with the wine industry. Okay, so I'm making notes as everybody's talking. I think the first thing and we talk about this all the time with clients on the packaging and branding side of things. We as an industry and our consumers, we have to break the mold of what we think about wine packaging. So whether it's alternative packaging, whether it's alternative bottles, whether it's alternative bottle shapes. So I'm in Barcelona now. I do work here with a company that's called Estal, and they have a great range of, I think, really innovative, very is there ever perfectly sustainable glass? No, we all know we're not going to get there, but this is moving the bar forward, where their glass has intentional occlusions. So there's part of the style and the brand, as it were, of the glass allows for them to have less waste, allows for, just a more sustainable bottle, even in terms of, as we're talking about bottle shape. If we change the neck height and the shoulder shape and all these things, we can get by with having lighter weight bottles in a way sometimes that the consumer might not even immediately be aware of when they're engaging with our brand, when they're picking up our bottles. There's lots of, and I think that the other thing that I really want to mention, since I'm getting myself in trouble on this one, is we have regulations around bottling, where we have to bottle, that presents a real issue that is specific to this discussion. And it's so deeply embedded. So the notion of estate bottled, our DOC or our AOC regulations, that things have to happen here, and then we have to put them in these big heavy bottles and we have to ship them across the world. And until we reach a vector where we are willing to actually assess these, very deeply ingrained regulations, we are going to constantly be fighting the glass and the shipping battle, I think. So
I'm grateful that you actually have gone with it and actually got into trouble, which is great. Love it. And also, I dare to say, maybe we should put the challenge out there. Shall we think about standardizing, God forbid, the shape of the bottles globally, so we can actually reach a way in which we can actually have standardized containers, standardized shippers, standardized, so we can actually look at maybe like the sharing the bottles instead of having to ship things around the world. Don't know. We'll put it out
can
there.
I answer?
Yes.
Can I address that? So
yes.
I interviewed Erica Crawford, who is organic, fabulous winemaker out of New Zealand. And she said, how do we do this? How do we standardize bottles? We do it, for everything else. Anyway, Then the next week, I interviewed Susan Pate, who is the woman who did all of the Mondavi branding for 30 years. She designed the Opus One labels. I mean, she is just an icon in terms of wine and spirits packaging. And I asked her this question, and her response was, the brands will never go for it. They'll never do it. We will never be allowed to standardize bottles. So, and my marketing experience says that Susan is probably closer to the truth than we want to believe.
We will leave it out there, and we put that questions to all the brands that are listening and let you guys think and reply to this. Matthew, thank you so much for joining. We are actually reached to the end of the webinar, and we need to move to the Q&A. But before we do that, I'd like to have one burning question for you. The burning question for you is, you come from the spirits perspective. So what is the biggest challenge when it comes to climate change for the spirit industry?
That's a great question. And really, our approach to this is looking at it holistically. The spirits industry is a very consumptive industry, start to finish. And our focus starts with, our growers, the practices that we operate at our facility and with our collaborations with our farmers, but taking it all the way cradle to grave, looking at every aspect of it. It has to be a holistic approach and not just kind of targeting certain areas. So we, look at, our sourcing, we look at our suppliers for our packaging. We're trying to make positive impacts at every step in our approach.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody, for this first part of the webinar. And now we need to move to the Q&As. So thank you again, Matthew, for joining. So I'd like to start with Eduardo. He says, great webinar as well. As a wellness lifestyle increases worldwide, do you see craft and premium non-alcoholic drinks entering the premium drinks category in the near future? And what role will they play in the consumer preferences? I don't know who would like to take this question.
I mean, I'll just make a quick comment. I don't think that addresses anything other than a consumer preference. It doesn't address climate. And so whether we go down that route to the current generations buying products that are more interested in it or not, we need to be more appropriate in terms of how we package those things and get that product out to the marketplace.
Thank you. Beatriz said, what are the expectations of the tequila industry in order to improve their sustainability efforts? I don't know who would like to address that. I mean, Greg, you have quite a lot of experience in this. I don't know if you want to have a go at it.
I drink tequila. I don't produce it. So I'm not sure I'm the best one on this. Maybe Matthew?
I'll have to say of the spirit industry, certainly tequila is one that probably will have a target on its back soon. But it is one of the most challenging to deal with, not only from a process standpoint, but the implications of cleaning up the wastewater streams are far more challenging than the other spirit categories, for sure. But not a lot of focus has been placed on that industry as of yet, but I think it's coming.
Thank you very much. And Tim is asking, as the impact of the raw materials is so large compared to packaging, do we need to discuss more the impact of monoculture within the drink, especially in spirits? And I was wondering if, maybe Jessica, you can talk a little bit about what you guys are doing. Matt, if you have any insights on that, and actually definitely Gregory as well.
I'm happy to talk about. I mean, it's true that working away from monoculture has been critical. I think packaging. I do insist that packaging is quite an important one that we have to nail, and that is quite a challenging one because we don't have the perfect solution today. Whilst in agriculture, probably not the perfect solution either, especially with climate change. Choices have to evolve, and we have to get better at irrigation, for example. We haven't talked about water consumption at all, but in places like Provence, or there's a whole cultural mindset to shift, but also the agricultural choices. I feel that luckily, so to speak, we know in agriculture more or less the direction we have to do, and go back to how viticulture was practiced hundreds of years ago, and planting more trees and shrubs within the vineyard. On one hand, to have that micellar or root interaction between the vines and the different plant species, but also to create, again, that corridor of biodiversity that brings naturally more life into the vineyard, and same with the cover crop. So I think that's quite a critical aspect to look at, definitely.
Thank you. Matt, anything that you can actually share a light from a spirits perspective?
Certainly, where our project is located, in the western slopes of the Rockies, water, is a precious commodity from us, all along, from how we practice growing to our production, and certainly it needs to be examined, across the board. I think part of, the industry as a whole, as I look at it, and we're trying to really focus on modernization and advanced practices and everything we do. There's a bit of romance in the way things were done historically, and we're trying to overcome some of those biases and introduce efficiencies, start to finish in our process, that may not be as romantic as some of the historical practices, but I think the society as a whole is ready for that, and it's a new paradigm that we're trying to advance as far as water conservation across the board.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to try, for the sake of time, because this is important, I like to try to get 2 questions in one. And this will be a combination of all of you, but I like Polly to lead this. I mean, Fleur Roberts is asking, when do you see the home entertainment industry going on luxury? Are we going to have a revival of the roaring 20s in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you think our post-COVID climate will impact spending longer term? And then with the same time, when you think about the home side of things, we think about glasses, et cetera, et cetera. And Ramona is asking, for the standard of a wine glass producer, how do you imagine the consumer perspective could change when it comes to consuming wine from a wine glass that is not transparent, but brown or green? So it's not just basically the glass, but actually the entire ecosystem. Big question. You have 8 minutes, go. Polly, you can kick started.
If I could give you the answer to that question about the roaring 20s or the next 5 to 10 years spending, I would be a genius. That answer has fluctuated back and forth pretty significantly over the past, I would say, 18 months. And it also has a lot to do with regionality. So we do see parts of America where you are more on the roaring 20s. I know that I'm fairly certain that it was L'Oreal who spent a lot of money on promoting cosmetics, because there was an expectation that we were all going to be going out into the world and we all wanted to look beautiful doing it. And in fact, some of that has just not panned out, especially in America, because of waves of COVID. I think that there are also, so I encourage every brand to explore the macro environment in marketing, something that we call pestle factors, which have to do with all of the external constraints or opportunities that we have no control over. So any brand that's looking at where are we going with consumer spending, I would say take your market, your region, and your audience and actually sit down and look at what does it mean for, politics, environment, of course, social, technological, economy, and legislation. So that's, I can't answer the whole question at once, but I can tell you how to get that answer for your brand. The green, brown glassing, I'm going to tell you the truth. Wine people are never going to go for it because what the wine looks like in the glass is so important. I mean, we judge through sight, right? Right off the bat. So I think that it's something that consumers can definitely do. I think that if that's something that is interesting, go for it and explain, message why, and what the impact. I think that's really important is that when we're making these changes, we don't need to be amorphous around, why we're doing it. We need to be very precise. We're doing this because our research has shown that this leads to this direct impact. And that's one of the most effective marketing and storytelling changes that a brand can make. So whether it's green drinking glasses or whether it's changes we're making in the vineyard, talk about specific impact.
Thank you very much. And Jessica, you're smiling. I'd love to know what you're smiling about. What's in your head right now?
Well, because I think there's just a lot of, it's so important to explain, but it's also, this is where from the beginning with Château Galoupet, where I felt that it was so important if a big group like LVMH can't take the risk, and it's a responsibility for us to carry some of the messaging there, that certain things need to change. Gregory mentioned a few alternative packagings. We said we wouldn't go there, but that's an important conversation to have. Obviously, a spirit industry or bubble industry or aging wine is a completely different can of worms, and glass remains the best option. I think we still have to look, but for those wines that don't age, those wines that aren't spirits, and those wines that don't have bubbles, there's some really interesting alternatives out there. In terms of the glasses, it's interesting. I remember I was smiling because I had a conversation with a glass, like drinking glass maker, and that one was an interesting one. But I guess where we have a little bit more scope, I guess, with a drinking glass situation is that we reuse them over and over again. I think with the bottles, the problem is that, and that's something that we've been looking at Château Galoupet, but it's a logistical nightmare, is how do we recover, or what's the word in English? How do we take back the empty bottles and reuse them, basically, because that would be optimal. But then that feeds back into what Polly was saying in terms of the provenance, and then how do you answer the AOC or DOC legislations where you have to be bottled at estates. So sorry. As with everything in this topic, everything is quite interconnected. And as Matthew was saying, the only or best way to have impact is really to look at all these different factors. So
thank you very much. And we only have time because I know that some of you have to go to your next webinar. So what is the next big trend? What do you think that the future holds for the glass industry? From the wine and spirits industry. Let's start with Matthew.
I think the next biggest trend is really the marriage of beautiful expressions of wine and spirits with the overall method and practices of how it was produced. I've often said, especially in the spirit industry, part of the call that you make says something about what you stand for, not just what's in the bottle. And certainly we want to make expressions, in all of our projects that taste beautifully for the consumers. But I think, the spirits industry as a whole, wine, liquor, beer, it's a great platform to advocate, for all of these things that are so important to our climate. It's an industry that everybody kind of touches and experiences, and hopefully the practices that we all, adopt for all of our projects trickle over to the other industries, that are related to what we do. But I think that's the biggest trend is to really marry the product with the methods of how we're making that product.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I mean, Polly, I know you have to go. So if you could really succinctly just give us your answer and then quietly sleep away. We're not going to say anything. Thank you.
I think I hope it's that all brands can watch what luxury is doing and understand that that personalized level of service, that knowing who our customers are and really meeting them where they're at is how we move forward. There's a lot of noise, there are a lot of brands, and we all need to just be a little bit more customer centric. And I see that happening more and more every day with the brands that we're working with. So that is maybe hopeful, but I believe that's the direction that we are going to have to go.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your contribution and your time. Jessica, over to you.
I think the interesting next step will be also from a legislation perspective. Polly mentioned it, but I think it's we're looking at climate-resistant grape varieties. How do we integrate those in the new appellation and so on? So I think there's a lot of headway within the brands, but that will have to also be met in terms of the legislation. And we know that in some of our more traditional countries, I won't name any names, but changing those laws are quite slow. So as much, perhaps not a trend just yet, but definitely one we should start looking at now.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And yeah, I mean, we have seen legislation moving fast in many other aspects of luxury. So I don't see why not. Wine would be one of those affected by legislation as well. Gregory, the last word, over to you.
Well, I think the next big trend is something that's always with us, and that's change. Change is forever tied to our societies and our production streams. And as Matthew said, this industry, premium drinks all across the board, has a big role within that framework. But we need to be able to, as Polly said, embrace the consumer interest, but also be consumers within the system and embrace change and understand that that's probably going to be the trend as we come out of this post-pandemic framework, whether it be via purchasing habits, as Jessica just said, policy can stifle innovation. So we need to understand kind of some of those kind of challenges as well. But I think change is with us, and we just need to embrace it as much as we can.
Thank you very, very, very much. And please feel free to download the report on positiveluxury.com/knowledge. And just taking your concept of the only certainty is uncertainty. So I like to certainly pass this on to the final closing words to Jamie. Over to you.
And your time from across the globe today. The webinar video will be released on our website later this week. And please, as Diana said, do visit positiveluxury.com and download our new Future Premium Drinks report. Sign up to our newsletter and follow Positive Luxury on LinkedIn for the latest reports, webinars, and community information. Thank you again, everyone, for watching, and we hope to see you again soon next month. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.